I guess first things first, man. How have you been? How's quarantine been treating you and the family?
It's been good. I mean, we haven't really had any downtime, to be quite honest with you. You know, once quarantine hit, we stayed in camp, myself and Francis, and then there was a handful of my guys that I knew had a short path to getting into the UFC, like Gustavo Lopez, Justin James. Like there was a handful of guys that we wanted to make sure they stayed busy in the room, and you know what, it ended up working out in the long run because these guys ended up getting those calls.
Yeah, I had Justin James on last Monday before he was an official UFC fighter.
Yeah.
Hell of a weekend for him, man. It was crazy to watch, unbelievable, quick turnaround. Got in there and put him away in 45 seconds. I guess what's your thought of that as a coach, and what's the overall message to fighters about staying ready?
I think it's important first and foremost to be within striking distance, especially when you're right outside of the UFC. And we talk about that all the time, and it's been a motto of just staying ready, because you want to make sure that when that phone does ring, that you can't, there's no opportunity to turn it down. So what we did was we even kind of took that one step further, where we were telling guys to go get their medicals done, go get their MRIs and their medicals done. So when the phone does ring, you're not only in shape, your weight's down, but you're 2 steps or 3 steps ahead with having your medicals all taken care of. So Justin is a guy that, I mean, he's been working so hard. He's just been right on the outside of the UFC. And his body language on that last Monday, you know, he was down and out. He was bummed that a guy that used to train here in Max Roshkoff, we got a call over him, and I could see it in his heart, man, in his eyes. Like the kid was upset, but it's amazing what a week can do, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you're the general manager as well as one of the main coaches. How has the pandemic really affected Xtreme Couture? Obviously, Xtreme Couture is a bigger gym. I'm sure financially things were fine, but I guess what was the overall like impact on the fighters and the gym?
Well, you know, for me, man, it's all about camaraderie. It's about being around each other and that team environment. That's what's most important. And sometimes when you alienate that or you take that away, that's what suffers the most. So the one thing that I was always prideful in the fact of, like, during that pandemic when we weren't around each other and we didn't have team practice, that was the one thing that most of the fighters hit me up about. I was like, man, I just miss the team. I miss being around the fellas and the ladies and just getting to work, you know. So that was hard. That was hard to get over that part. But you know, once we were able to open the doors up again, I mean, you bet we were right back to work.
So we'll start, I guess, by talking a little bit about your background, because I think it is in football, right?
Yeah, I was a football guy.
How'd you get into MMA and coaching at Xtreme Couture?
So it was, I think it was 2007 when Randy was just about to open the gym. He was training for Tim Sylvia. Just kind of a lost kid, man. I really didn't know what I wanted to do after playing ball, and that was the one thing that I think I missed the most, was that camaraderie and that team, if you will. I set foot in the gym, and they weren't even really open yet. They were just about a month away from opening their doors. And then Randy just invited me back in and said, let's come in and start getting some work. It's just a bunch of pro fighters. And Mike Pyle and Jay Haran and, you know, John Alessi and those guys, and they just beat the shit out of me for a couple weeks on end. And then, you know, the gym opened up. I started training underneath Dennis Davis and then Mike Pyle. And it was about a year into it, I started coaching here. So they gave me a grappling coach position, and just kind of took the ball and ran with it.
What sorts of lessons from football can you apply to some of your fighters?
You know, for me, I think as a coach, I'm a big film guy. So watching a lot of film is a big asset of mine that I've always enjoyed doing, even in football. So studying my opponent and studying ourselves as well. It's very important not only to watch your opponent, but to watch your fighter and break yourself down to try to look for some patterns and some things that you might be not noticing and doing. Because if I'm not watching it, well, you know, or your opponent's watching it, and they might see something that you're not. So to me, really, it's been a lot of film, and of course, you know, the team aspect, and putting the team ahead of you, and making sure that you're not above that and setting that standard. That's always been very important to me as well.
So you mentioned Randy. It is his birthday, so we have to give him a shout out on his birthday. What is Randy like as a friend and as a fellow coach and an athlete?
Man, well, you know, he's like my big brother. So he's just full of knowledge. I almost to the point where I forget about, not necessarily forget, but I don't want to bug him about stuff. And then when I ask him certain questions, he gives me such insight on what he thinks as far as game plan wise goes. He was always one of the best game plan masterminds that's ever fought in MMA. And for me, it's like I'm always learning, and I'm always trying to evolve my game. So anytime I can involve Randy in anything that I do, I learn so much from him, whether it's the mental side of the game or the actual physical side of the game. That's why I brought him on when we had Francis, when Francis was fighting Jairzinho. It was important to bring Randy in here, not only for what his knowledge is, but I wanted Francis to understand what a UFC champion, his mindset was, and the way he carried himself on his day-to-day, and it was important for him to see that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I noticed about Francis is his mindset has changed tremendously since that first title fight. He's just starching guys. He's going crazy. He's knocking out guys in 45 seconds. UFC title holders, future Hall of Famers. What changes has he made since joining Xtreme Couture? And what can we expect if he gets another title shot, if it goes the distance, or if it's outside of a minute? What changes can we expect from Francis?
Well, I guess it's a good problem to have because, since he's been in Xtreme Couture when the first Blades fight, the second Blades fight, that's when he started training here more full time. He's been working on and evolving his game, and fortunately for us, he hasn't really had to show it. But in that time frame, he's really worked on his MMA cardio, his wrestling, his ground game, to the point where in the last sparring sessions we have with Bagoy Ivanov, he was taking Bagoy down repeatedly, and this is a world Sambo champ, and Bagoy couldn't even get back up. So we're starting to see this guy kind of turn a corner and understand it's not just all about the home run. We want to make sure that he's covered in all assets in this sport because, like you said, I mean, not every fight's going to get past, the first minute. Sometimes you're going to have to dig deep, and we're going to have to get in the deeper rounds. Well, what do we need to get out of it? We're definitely going to make sure our cardio is on point. We're going to have to be able to wrestle and counter wrestle. And shit, we might even take some people down along the way.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing that, going into that first Stipe fight, once Stipe got a hold of him, it was completely different. We saw a side of Francis that we hadn't seen before. And I think a lot of people thought was, okay, we found his weakness. But when he fought Curtis Blades that second time, I thought it was just going to be like, oh, we found the blueprint, take him down. But what's it like holding the pads for a guy with that much power?
It's funny because Coach Dewey Cooper and I, we hold pads for him all the time, and it's honestly the closest thing you're ever gonna do, like jumping out of an airplane. You're like, oh shit, all right, here we go, and then you go. But him and I hit a lot. We hit a lot of pads. We work on a lot of movement. We work on a lot of technique, and over time, it's like just freaking cage with a shark. The shark can bite your hand off at any point, so you got to be careful, mind your P's and Q's. But he is by far pound for pound the hardest hitter I've ever held for.
Yeah, including football players.
Yeah, I mean, Ray Cephal's up there. Ray, there's something about Ray, the way he hits and the style he hits is very precise, very quick, all technique behind it. But Ray hits hard. Vinny Margalesh kicks hard as hell. There's guys that would argue that, but yeah, Francis pound for pound for sure.
Yeah, so he's pretty much he's in a really weird spot where he essentially cleaned out the division before he's got a second shot at a title. What would you like to see next for him? Obviously, there's a big title fight there in the heavyweight division, but we don't really know what's going to happen between Cormier and Stipe. As a friend and as a coach, obviously, you probably want him to stay active, but at the same time, it's, you don't want to risk it. You've got a shot at a title that's guaranteed. It's guaranteed to be his. What would you like to see from him?
I kind of leave that up to him and his managers. But I'm with you. There's really no other fight to make but a title fight. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's probably not going to be until about December, if that's the case. And then depending on who comes out of this on top, and if DC does decide to retire, I mean, hell, Stipe can win and defend the title and retire himself. So we don't know what the scenario might be. But I'm with you, man. There's really nothing else to make but other than sit back and wait. But in the meantime, it's important to use this time wisely and prepare and get better on all the areas that we need to work on. If we're just sitting around and worrying about, knocking guys out in the first minute, that's not logical. So we need to get back in and get working and doing all those little things. And that's what he's been doing. He's been in every week, and we're always just kind of just build a little bit on top of all the skill set that he has already.
Obviously, you built a huge connection with a lot of your fighters. Fight Island is huge. Everyone wants to be a part of it. As a coach, is that something that you're like, man, I got kids at home. I don't know if I want to go through that. I don't know if I want to travel all the way over there, risk catching something, or are you all in? It's like if I get the call to go, I'm all in. I'm going.
Yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in, man. And then these are my guys, and I love them. And obviously Dan Ige got the call. We weren't expecting to be fighting this soon. And right away we got the call, and that was it. We jumped right on it. I planned on trying to go out with Joe Benavidez. So it worked out just perfect where I'll have Dan and then I'll stay out there and corner Joe. But whatever I can do for these guys. Of course, when the first pandemic hit, I sat down and talked with my wife and kids about possibly cornering during the pandemic and at the one at Tachi Palace, which was planned to be. And, all of them had no problem with it. They felt quite comfortable with me going out and doing my job. And I appreciate that, because without my family, had they had some resentment or pushback towards it, it would have definitely probably changed my mind a little bit towards that, but chances are I would still go.
You have to think that the location of the UFC headquarters being right there in Vegas, that was definitely favorable for Xtreme Couture, because I'm sure any last minute replacements, you're probably one of the first gyms. I think that was probably key to guys like Justin getting that call. What are your thoughts? And I guess, as a whole, what are your thoughts on the UFC doing what they did and staying active and being ahead and being like, you know what, we're going to do this. I know all other sports are canceled, but let's go ahead and put these fights on. Yeah,
I actually sent Dana a text after Jacksonville, because, I had Francis, I had Dan Ige, and I had Claudia Gadelha. And, he provided us a platform, but also an opportunity to make some money during a time when no one's making any money, and without those fights and without obviously the guys winning, I was able to provide for my family during a rough pandemic where, a lot of people are not working at this time. So I get it. I understand that there's inherent risk in everything we do in life, and then putting ourselves out there a little bit more during this time is certainly risky. But I appreciate the fact, and I applaud Dana for doing what he did, because, it gave us all a platform to be able to make a little money and work.
So we've talked about Dan Ige, we've talked about Francis Ngannou, Justin James, Claudia Gadelha. Who are the up-and-comers out of Xtreme Couture? Who can we expect in the UFC in the next 1-2 years? Who do you think really has a shot at making a name for themselves?
Well, right now we have Puna Soriano, who's in the UFC. You only got to see him for a brief moment, and we saw what he was able to do in the first round. He's probably one of the more exciting guys that I can't wait to get this kid back in the cage again. I think Puna for sure. Gustavo Lopez, you saw him just get his shot. That was obviously a one-day notice, and you didn't get to see the best of him. But I'm so proud of what he was able to do, and not quitting, being in there for 3 rounds, working as hard as he could, having a smile on his face throughout the whole fight. Didn't go his way. He lost the fight, but he won the battle. So I was super happy with him. Boston Salmon, he's been in the UFC. He fought at 135. He had some very, very tough weight cuts that I think as far as us as a coaching staff and UFC PI, we failed him on that. We should have had him fight at featherweight early on. So now he's going to get his shot back into LFA, fighting at featherweight. So I'm really excited to see him get into a new weight class and see him a lot healthier. And then we got Montel Williams. That's Montel Williams Jr., man. This kid started with training with us when he was 18 years old. He is a prodigy in this room. What he does in the middleweight and welterweight division. This kid's a guy to keep your eye out on him. He's going to fight next week up in Montana. He's an absolute stud.
All right, now we'll kind of talk we'll end it up on some non-MMA material, man. You're a father of 3. You've worked with guys like Francis Ngannou, all these legends. What would you like to see your kid be a fighter, knowing that there's animals like Francis out there?
I'll leave that up to him, and he loves the sport. He's I got videos and pictures of him in actually Stipe when he was just barely walking, and He walks around always wearing boxing gloves. He's always punching stuff. He's always hitting stuff. It's one thing now when you get to punch something, it doesn't hit you back. But once you get popped in the nose, it might change your tune a little bit. But, my dad was so great with me coming up. He always just pushed me in whatever sport I decided to do. And, my dad was my football coach, and I came from a long line of football coaches in my family. So football was natural for me, and that was something that fit me really well. So I think for Knox, I would try to get him into some wrestling and, see how he takes to it. But whatever he decides to do, man, I'm going to always have his back and support him.
I love it, man. Thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Best of luck out there in Fight Island. I'm really rooting for Dan Ige. I know it's a quick turnaround. I think it's just over 2 months. So it's going to be a tough fight. I'm looking forward to all your fighters, man, and hopefully Francis gets back out there. Every time he's on TV, man, I'm like, I got to watch this because someone's head's going to get blown off.
It's the best seat in the house, I'll tell you that.
Man, it's so exciting, man. I want to see him box like Deontay Wilder or something, but I know that's probably somewhere down the line. But man, he's a physical specimen and unbelievable to watch.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't wait to get him back in there, and hopefully soon we'll be able to show some more of that MMA game that we've been working on so hard.
All right, man. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it, and all the best.
All right, brother. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Stay safe.
You too. Later.